Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just past midnight on Wednesday, June the 4th. That makes this the events for Tuesday, June the 3rd, 2025, day 1196 of Russia's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. Or 3 years and 100 days. Today is 3 years and 100 days from the full-scale invasion. And we are rapidly approaching the 2-year anniversary of this channel. That'll be this Friday. Guys, I am 500 followers away from 40,000. I would love to celebrate my 2-year anniversary with 40,000 followers. So if you are not a follower of this channel, hang out and see if it isn't worth it. I think it is. When Chris Carter comes in, if we see Chris Carter tonight, thank him. He is the sponsor of this live. Thank you, Chris. And tomorrow we have a brand new sponsor, Anna Rivera. I don't know Anna's TikTok handle, so I had messaged you, Anna, if you are here. Anyway, how's everybody doing tonight? I see the peeps are coming in. Hey, somebody just followed me there. Thanks, pal. Helping to get me to that 40,000 mark. I sure do appreciate it. Hey, Seawolf. Hey, Norbert Hackoff. How's everybody doing? Hello, Minnesota. Hey, Steve with a V. Richard Prexis. Magnus Carlson is here. Hey, Darlene. Hey, Brian Kornbaugh. Hey, Mad Mike. Hey, Jackie. UK. Hey, Coop. The bridge is reopened, Tommy. So, Anthony, Tom. It's a great, let's start there then, right? Let's start there. So, thank you, Bella Brody. Dig this. The bridge is reopened on the car side. So the bridge has 2 lanes for cars. It has 2 lanes for trains, right? One of the car lanes is permanently closed. So the bridge gets open 3 hours in one direction, 3 hours in the other direction, back and forth, right? The car part of the bridge has been reopened. So the supports that were hit are under the railroad bridge. Now, we still don't have any idea how it was done. There are lots of theories floating around. I have my theory. Other people have their theories. There was a good theory today put forth by Such a Mimos over on YouTube, who does great work, a very sharp guy. He's got satellite images that show a boat doing construction work, apparently construction work, reconstruction work, at the place of the explosion from June 1st. So the satellite image from just 2 days ago shows a construction crew right in the area of the explosion. Could those have been Ukrainian special forces pretending to be a construction crew? We don't know, right? Could be a coincidence. For all we know, somebody else, I put forth a theory that some ship that regularly transits that area every day for a year has been dropping a mine there. Maybe that's what happened. Other people have suggested that it's the Ukrainian unmanned submersible vessel, which is basically an AI-driven torpedo, right? They're like 3 meters long, about 9 feet long, packed with about 100 kilograms of explosives each, or maybe a little bit more. I'd have to check. But a pretty powerful hit, right? And it's been suggested that it's those submersible loitering munitions that did this damage. The reality is we don't know. Everybody was asking the question yesterday, why did the Ukrainians tell us how they did the strikes in Russia? And think that there were lots of reasons. Certainly the fact that they wouldn't be able to hide it because they had to leave the container evidence behind. So they might as well take the glory for it. In this case, we're not getting any details, very likely, of course, because they are going to do it again. They are going to do it again. Now, think about what they did. Think about this hit on the bridge. Yes, the bridge is still standing. Yes, the car part of the bridge is open. All of that is very disappointing to those of us who have been waiting. It's over a year now since Budanov said the bridge would be down in 100 days, which clearly was disinformation intended to drive Russian air defense assets and energy into protecting the bridge. I think we can see that now, hindsight being 2020 the way that it is. So the car part of the bridge is open. Why? And that means where they drove the explosives under the rail part of the bridge meant that no civilians were ever in danger from this operation, a hallmark of Ukrainian execution. And it also means that the focus is on the military logistical aspects of the bridge. The bridge traditionally had been the method by which rail cars full of soldiers, equipment, and war materiel would flow into Crimea. The bridge has not been capable of supporting the heavy trains that carry tanks, let's say, for over a year, since the first two hits on the bridge. Russia has undertaken some repair work, likely to support the delivery of war materials over the bridge. It is so in line with Ukrainian methodology to wreck something, wait for the Russians to fix it, and then hit it again. And I think that that's maybe what we're seeing here. Because now the bridge certainly, the rail part of the bridge, certainly cannot handle any heavy traffic and likely cannot even any longer handle passenger rail. But the road portion of the bridge is as good today as it was yesterday. Now, why might the Ukrainians leave that part of the bridge alone? They clearly could have if they could bring a ton of explosives in for under the railroad supports, they could easily have put a half a ton under the road supports, right? Why didn't they? I think it's because of the tourists. Now, guys, it's hard to understand this, I know. But on Russian TV, there is no war. There is a special military operation. And that special military operation is far away from Crimea. Crimea, Russia, Crimea strong. Ukrainians cannot hurt us in Crimea. And so there are ads on the TV for people to go vacation in Crimea even today, which is insanity to all of us, right? But they do. They do. And the summer tourist season began just a couple weeks ago. Crimea is, hey, Paulino. Hey, everybody. If you don't know Paulino, this guy is great. And today he really came through for me personally. He gave me my first heads up about the bridge attack 36 minutes after it broke on the wire services. So Paulino, you know I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And everybody who's sending me AI videos of Donald Trump dancing in a dress, fucking stop it, please. Please. Enough of that garbage. I don't need it. Anyway. So look it. This is what I'm thinking. There are 100,000 Russian tourists right now in Crimea on the beach. You want them out of there. Tourism is the Crimean economy. You break the tourist cycle you wreck the economy in Crimea. And that's good for Ukraine right now, as it's all under Russian control. That's Russian revenue tax base that funds the war that murders Ukrainian grandmothers in their beds every day. So driving the tourists out and sending them screaming back to Russia with how bad things are in Crimea is a psychological operation on the Russian people and a strategic operation on the economy in Crimea. So right now, every civilian tourist who was dumb enough to go to Crimea has an escape route and can get out. They don't have to take the 10-hour nightmare, 10 hours if you're lucky, 10 hours if you can find gas along the way to travel through the temporarily occupied territories of Zaporizhia to get, and I think Donetsk too. I think you have to go through Donetsk for a while there. Until you finally get to the relative security of Rostov-on-Don. 10 hours out of the way. Whew. And through a nightmare landscape of an active war zone in the temporarily occupied territories, through the ruins of Mariupol before you get to Rostov. So the Ukrainians, as we have seen, over and over and over again in this war, are always very conscious of minimizing civilian casualties. If they had trapped all those tourists in Crimea, and they then had to make their way through that nightmare wasteland of eastern Ukraine, you know there would be fatalities among them. It just is inevitable. And Ukraine doesn't want that blood on their hands. They do have to face reality, Lola. You are not wrong. Now look at the cognitive dissonance that it takes to think to yourself, oh yeah, we have a special military operation in Ukraine, but I just love the beach at Sevastopol. Oh, baby. The shawarma is the best. It's insanity. It's insanity. Think of the cognitive dissonance that you have to have as a Russian to watch a third of your strategic bomber fleet destroyed in the most meticulously planned and executed sabotage operation of this war, indeed of the 21st century, anywhere. And then go to Istanbul and demand Ukraine's full surrender. What world are these people living in? What world are they living in? It's insanity. And you know what world they're living in. They're living in the world of Russian cognitive dissonance, where facts don't matter, just the opinions of the dear leader. And if the dear leader comes on the TV and says everything is fine, even as his palace is burning around him and his gold toilet is melting in the corner, you have to agree that everything is fine, or face the repercussions, and don't dare use the word war, or you're staring down the barrel of a 15-year prison sentence. It's exactly like MAGA, Arn. It's exactly like MAGA. These people are not interested in facts at all. So there is a deep, deep cognitive dissonance inside Russia. There has to be. And while I don't agree with the whole Pearl Harbor analogy that everybody's making, while I don't agree with the Pearl Harbor analogy for a lot of reasons, there is one part of it that's important, and where it is similar to Pearl Harbor. Remember, the America First movement is not a new thing. It's an isolationist, racist, xenophobic movement that kept us out of World War II for 5 years. saying that a war in Europe doesn't matter to us. It doesn't affect us. Pardon me. We should mind our own business and stay at home. Those same people were living in a bubble where they weren't facing the reality, the zeitgeist of their times. The Russian people are in that bubble, unaware that the world is looking at them in despair and disgust, reviling these people who aren't interested in politics. They don't have political opinions. They're non-political. Our leaders do what they want. It has nothing to do with us. All the while, their lives, their energy, their effort is driving the genocide in Ukraine, making it possible, funding the war. Blood is not on Putin's hands alone. The blood is on the hands of every Russian person that has not stood up about this. There is no possibility of nuclear war. This is nonsense. This is a Russian disinformation campaign. And we should talk about that tonight, actually. Let me make a little note of that. Now, on the subject of nuclear war, it is important to recognize that this attack against the strategic bomber fleet was a direct attack against Russia's nuclear triad. These are the bombers that carry the nuclear bombs and deliver them to their targets, right? 1/3 of Russia's nuclear triad: air, sea, and land. Silo-based missiles, submarine-based missiles, and air-based missiles. It is astonishing to me, on the subject of facts, that we are living in a world where administration officials in the United States and close friends of the administration are decrying a crippling attack on Russia's nuclear capabilities. What world are we living in? As an American taxpayer, I saw the American government for decades spend my tax dollars to counter the Russian nuclear threat. And today I have to listen to Steve Bannon demand that President Trump condemn this sneak attack, this sneak terrorist attack on Russian nuclear capabilities. I have to listen to the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, in his arrogance and ignorance, say the words that Ukraine should never have done this without U.S. approval. Who the fuck are you? Ukraine has every right to defend itself. Ukraine made a military strike on a military target in order to degrade the ability of the enemy to prosecute its illegal war of aggression. Who the fuck is J.D. Vance to go to for approval of any mission? And you and I know, we know, that if the Ukrainians had been foolish enough to tell the Trump administration about this plan, Russia would know about it now. Because the United States federal system is subverted by a malign foreign agent in the person of Donald Trump. What else did Vance say that really bothered me? He did say something else. I guess I didn't write it down. He said something else remarkably stupid. I'm sorry, I don't have that quote. Now, let's talk a little bit about the attack on the planes, because initially we heard 41 planes. That number then dropped. Ukraine only took credit for 12 this morning. Right, we're waiting on satellite photos, and as the satellite photos are coming in, the number keeps going up. So this morning it was 12. By the middle of the afternoon, it was 16. By the Evening Times publication, New York Times, the New York Times estimates 20 plus planes destroyed or damaged. Okay, so 20, let's say 20. Let's just say 20 for a second. How many of these planes do they have? Well, we believe they had 47 Tu-95s, 55 Tu-22s, and 22 Tu-160s. That's about 120 planes. That means that 1/5 of the force has been destroyed. The nuclear-capable bomber force. Not the whole Air Force, not the fighter jets, not the other bomber types, just those, right? The strategic nuclear missile-carrying bomber fleets. That's why this was an attack against the nuclear triad. They could have gone for the fighters. They could have gone for the IL-76 transports. They didn't. They were focused on the Tu-22s, the Tu-95s, and the Tu-160s. Now dig this. They did also hit an A-50, the Russian AWACS, right? The $350 million flying air traffic controller with tactical firing solution coordination capabilities. Flying command center. Now dig this. How many A-50s did Russia have before the war? We think they had 10. We think of the 10, fewer than half were flying. So they maybe at the start of the war had 5 that were flying. Ukraine has now destroyed 3 of the 5, and it is unclear whether the last 2 are actually still capable of flying. The A-50, we saw satellite photos today. I haven't published them yet. I just got them before the live started. But we've got satellite photos that show the destroyed A-50, or at very least damaged enough it'll never fly again. So one of the planes destroyed was an A-50. Multiple people online are suggesting, this includes Juzzy over at Reporting from Ukraine TV and or Ukraine News TV. It includes such a Mimos on YouTube. I didn't see anything from the ISW on this. But both those guys and other analysts believe that this was the last functional AWAC that they had. The last one. And it is now smoldering on the tarmac. $350 million. Now, of the rest of the fleet, right? They took out one, they definitely, and the number may yet rise as we get better satellite photos. But we now have confirmed 1/5 of the strategic bomber fleet destroyed or damaged beyond repair. What does that mean is left? That part is very unclear. Such a Mimos today went through satellite images from as long as 3 years ago that showed Tu-95 sitting around with no engines. And he had a bunch of them. So of the 47 or so Tu-95s, maybe as few as 16 of them are actually still flying. And we don't know, of the half dozen or so that we know were destroyed, if they were the ones that were flying. So we're still waiting to get all the details of this and get some clarity through this fog of war. But again, I think it's fair to say that 1 in 5 of the strategic bombers are gone. Just consider for a moment. So there are a couple implications of these attacks on the Kerch Bridge and on the strategic bomber fleet that I think are important to recognize. Both of these attacks mean that Russia will have to divert resources into areas that they were not previously spending the kind of money they're going to have to spend now, or they're going to feel compelled to spend. In terms of the aviation strikes, the effects it's had on Russian shipping already are unbelievable. There are videos from all over Russia of people filming miles and miles long lines of trucks just waiting to get through checkpoints. This strike could, I don't want to overstate it. We don't know how heavy-handed the Russians are going to be in terms of their own trucking industry. But what it's looking like right now is that in an already constrained economy where shortages are rampant, the delivery of goods and services is being slowed to a snail's pace. The implications of that on an economy that's already teetering on the edge of collapse are not to be understated. I don't want to overstate them either. We're going to have to wait and see how long the Russians stay as paranoid as they are right now. But the psychological effects of these operations are huge. One of those psychological effects are going to be on the frontline troops. I cannot imagine, and I have not talked to anybody on the front line, so I can't say that this with certainty. But I cannot imagine that the Ukrainian troops are anything less than ebullient today, or ecstatic, that they've had a morale boost like you wouldn't believe from these hits. While on the other side, the Russians must be less sure of themselves than they ever are. And this is really important. This is so important, guys. Why is it so important? It's so important because somebody said to me, there was a comment on one of my videos today, this big thing happened and now all the problems of the front line have just disappeared. That is not true. These hits did not make the 50,000 troops that are pouring into Sumy today go away. This did not lessen the fighting around Kerch or Pokrovsk. The Ukrainians in the trenches right now are facing the onslaught of Russia's summer offensive in its third day. So I thought it was important that while, yes, we talk about these big glitzy strikes, that we take some time today and we go through the front line and what's really happening on the ground as valiant Ukrainian defenders continue to defend this nation against the onslaught of at least 50,000 troops pouring over the border in Sumy, advancing, according to the Ukrainian Center for Defense Strategy, as much as 1.25 kilometers this morning. So in Sumy, right, Sumy's right along the border with Russia. Russia's got 50,000 guys up here pressing down, invading Sumy in a three-pronged attack. That center prong, hey, Russia, that center prong advanced today 1.25 kilometers. That's the first real largest single daily Russian advance that we have seen in months and months and months. Now, that's not to say that the fighting isn't heavy and that it's not costing them, I don't want to say an arm and a leg. It's not costing them a lot of men. I'm sure it is. But 50,000 guys are coming in a three-pronged attack. Now, not only that, the Russians have really ramped up their rocket attacks on Sumy. President Zelensky today condemned a Russian multi-launch rocket system attack against civilian targets, including a market in Sumy today. That strike killed 3 civilians and injured more than 24. The Ukrainians are still in Kerch. There is heavy fighting going on. They just have a little sliver of Kerch, right, down south of Sudza. And then out in the west of Kerch, they have a little sliver on the right bank of the same river. How long? Friday is not only the 2-year anniversary of this channel. And guys, if you don't follow this channel, please help me out. Follow the channel. I am 4 days away from my 2-year anniversary. and 400 followers away from 40,000. So if you don't follow the channel, please follow the channel and help me get to 40,000 for my birthday coming up. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The Ukrainians are still in Kursk. They got a toehold in, and they're hanging on by their own bleeding fingernails. But it is important to remember that this Friday, it will be 10 months of Ukrainians going to bed, waking up every night in control of Russian territory. The thing the world thought was impossible, that Russia could be invaded and anyone could hang on to any land there. They have showed the world, no, you can. And you know the world is paying attention. The world is paying attention. And let's not forget they're in Belgorod too. And somehow a train trestle, or rather a roadway bridge over a train track in Bryansk region blew up the other day. Don't know how that happened. Down in the Volchansk area, very intense attacks and heavy fighting, but no progress on either side. The Ukrainians seem to have the Russians pinned, and they seem unable to move forward. Heavy aggression in the Kupiansk sector. So the Russians are pushing to try to envelop Kupiansk. This is the direction in which the Ukrainians had a successful behind-the-lines Black Hawk helicopter mission just this past week. So dig it. For the first time in this war, we saw Ukrainians, maybe about 50 Ukrainians, flying in Black Hawk helicopters behind enemy lines, getting behind the enemy, dropping their guys out, the helicopters getting the fuck out of there. And those 50 guys then attacked the Russian positions from the rear, clearing trenches as they went, catching the Russians off guard, catching them by surprise, all the while moving toward their exfiltration point, right, their escape route, and along the way, identifying Russian targets, troop concentrations, ammo dumps, headquarters, and calling in missile strikes on those locations, clearing the path for them to escape from there. This was right around Kupiansk. So that's the Kharkiv-Luhansk border, right on the Oskil River. This was on, the helicopters crossed the Oskil to get behind the enemy lines and execute this operation. Phenomenal work by Ukrainian special forces. Really phenomenal work. In that kind of operation, it seems impossible that all your men could get out safely. We have not had any word of lost Ukrainians during that fight. But we haven't had any word. In the Liman direction, just right around Kupiansk there, I think just to the, if I did this right, going clockwise around the border, Liman is just south of there. For a week now, Russia have been pushing, and over the last 10 days or so, have made a 6-kilometer long, but only 1 kilometer wide, advance in an attempt to envelop a village in that region. This is of concern. If they're in that village, then they have forward positions from which they can launch attacks to destabilize Ukrainian logistics in the region. That's of concern, and we are watching those developments closely. In Chasiv Yar, the Russians made marginal gains with extraordinary losses. All the attacks are coming in on foot or on motorcycles, and they're getting pummeled, but they are advancing. As the Ukrainians run out of ammunition, more zombie orcs come to the front. Russia is making gains northwest of Toretsk, trying to flank the town. Again, marginal gains, but they are trying to encircle Toretsk. Pokrovsk is where all the action is. Not all the action, but literally half of the action. Of the 167 attacks by Russian Federation forces in the last 24 hours, fully half of them were around Pokrovsk. Today, there are Ukrainian drone operators in Pokrovsk who have a confirmed kill record of over 1,000 Russian soldiers each. So on one drone team, there's about a dozen guys who have confirmed kills of 1,000 Russian soldiers each. It's that kind of asymmetrical approach, dependent on the new and innovative technologies that are available, that are letting the much smaller Ukraine keep the orc hordes at bay for now. For now. This is why Russia, with every advantage, has failed in this war. They have failed to adapt. They have failed to innovate. They have failed to come to terms with the reality of the 21st century and are fighting this thing like it's a 19th century conflict. The USA is still supplying the Biden gifts to Ukraine. Trump has given nothing. Nothing. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a second here. Pokrovsk, the fighting around Pokrovsk is most intense to the northeast and the southwest as Russian Federation forces attempt to encircle the city. According to sources, the Russian 8th and 51st armies have moved large numbers of reserves into those areas, trying to exploit recent breakthroughs. Those advances are being slowed by Ukrainian counterattacks, but the fighting is fierce and losses are heavy on both sides. In Zaporizhia, the Russians are engaging in probing and reconnaissance in force attacks, pushing to get towards Zaporizhia city, which, by the way, they have demanded Ukrainian forces withdraw from and hand the city over to them as part of a ceasefire agreement. This is what I'm talking about. Complete capitulation is the only thing the Russians want to hear about, and they have the nerve to demand it, even as a third of their strategic bomber fleet is in ruins and the Kerch bridge is still smoking. It's ridiculous. In Kherson, the Russian-installed governor reported that 700,000 residents are without power following what the Russians claimed were Ukrainian shelling and drone attacks against power substations, which I found very interesting. The strike on the bridge and the power out in Kherson, cutting the land bridge to Crimea, was the goal of Ukraine's 2023 offensive. They never got anywhere near it because the Russians had had a year to build defensive lines and bring in 100,000 more men to man those lines. And so the Ukrainian counteroffensive of 2023 was stalled. But the goal has always been the siege of Crimea. Cut the Kerch bridge, cut the ferry service, cut the resupply lines, and then cut off access through Kherson. Could it be that the Ukrainians are near to trying to do just that? We don't know. We don't know. Odessa is reeling from an overnight port attack, missile attack and drone attack that hit the port and residential buildings in the area. This is important, of course, because that's the grain corridor. That's where Ukrainian grain gets shipped out to the world to help keep the Ukrainian economy going. Now, very interesting report from Dominic Nichols. And you guys know I promote these guys all the time because they're brilliant. And they're part of the reason I'm in Ukraine. I listened to them for a year before I came here. And they did help inspire me. And the incredible Dominic Nichols and his partner in crime, Francis Durnelly, are in Odessa today. And in their report, Nichols said something very interesting. He was talking about U.S. supplied patrol boats, these little island hoppers that Coast Guards and navies use to go on patrol, not out to sea, but along the shore. Ukraine's got dozens of them. Nichols was unable to get an official count, but they've got dozens of them supplied by the Biden administration. There were 3 more that were supposed to come here. According to Nichols, the Trump administration canceled those last 3 boats and sent the men that were in the United States getting trained by the Coast Guard home in an absolute backstabbing betrayal of our ally, our democratic ally, in favor of our authoritarian enemy. Again, there's just no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump and his cohort of goons and ghouls are creatures of the Kremlin. And the Qataris and the Saudis and the Syrians and anybody else that will line their corrupt pockets. Now, in the UK, there was an oligarch, Abramovich, who owned a football team. That's a soccer team for all the Americans here. He sold it for like $2 billion or something, like a lot of money. And he said he was going to give the money to Ukraine war victims. Well, his politics is shadowy at best. And so UK officials have frozen those monies until they know that they're going to Ukrainian war victims, not Russian war victims. Right, and that's about all I know about that story. If any of the UK guys want to fill us in on any of the dirt. Now, on the subject of the Trump administration supplying weapons to Ukraine, they're not. In fact, they're even denying the sale of weapons to Ukraine. Donald Trump, the great businessman, the man of money, right, who writes off European allies as freeloaders, come to him and say, Donald, dear king, dear prince, oh great dear leader, please, can we spend $50 billion? And will you sell us 15 Patriot systems to start? Look, we have the money. He dismisses it and won't sell them the weapons. Trumpists, tell me why. Why won't he sell? Not give, not a handout, but why won't he take $50 billion into the U.S. economy? A, because that's an economy he's trying to wreck and he doesn't want to give it any help. And B, because he's a creature of the Kremlin and he won't sell the weapons because it will displease Darth Sidious, his master. So no. There's no weapons coming from the United States anytime soon. We're all deeply grateful that in this nightmare situation, at the very least, intelligence sharing is apparently still going on. And they're not stopping the Biden aid, although they did with those 3 boats. So what else are they stopping? What else are they holding up? What else are they slowing down? You can be sure every fucking thing they can. These traitors. Now, in terms of nuclear war, guys, it is really important to understand. First of all, if you don't follow the channel, please do. I'm 4 days away from my 2-year anniversary and 400 followers away from 40,000. 444. Hey, that's the time they blew the bridge this morning. That's funny. Anyway, so if you don't follow me, please do. Now, on the subject of nuclear war, look, we know that the Russians are spending a couple $1 million on a disinformation campaign against the West to make us all afraid that they are going to go nuclear. I mean, they're literally spending the money to lie to us every day. This is the worst kind of Russian disinformation. It plays on our fears. And you can choose to be afraid of nuclear war. You can choose to live your life in fear of Russia's nuclear blackmail. But that is no kind of life to have. And so it is much better to look these bastards in the eye and say, do it. Do it. Go ahead, do it. Because 43 minutes later, 500 years of Russian history will come to an end. 1 in 4 Russians live in Moscow and Petersburg. Puh. All you need are two missiles. That's it. And 500 years of Russian history comes to an end. You think the Kazakhs aren't going to take advantage of that and move north? You don't think that the Chinese will move into Siberia to protect their hundreds of billions of dollars of investments? You don't think that the Georgians will retake North Ossetia and abracadabra, whatever the fuck it is? Come on, give me a break. Of course they will. Russia's enemies will move in. Petersburg would make a great Finnish city, I think. I think that's fair to say. Yeah, North Korea does the same thing, Annette. You're absolutely right. So that's the strategic nuclear arsenal. We need to call their bluff on that because they're bluffing, if any of their shit even works. Then there's the other side of that coin, the tactical nuclear strike, right? The smaller 400 to 700 ton nuclear device. 400 to 700. So when we think about that, it is important to recognize that that comprises about 1/3 of Russia's nuclear arsenal, about 2,000 devices. And that the analyst consensus is none of them still work. They are difficult to maintain, they are expensive to maintain, and in an army rife with corruption, it is unlikely in the extreme that those devices have been maintained. In fact, we have evidence to suggest just how useless they are, because 2 years ago, during the winter offensives, trying to knock out all the power grid here, the Russians were screwing the warheads off and just sending the empty missiles to try to overwhelm air defense. So the analyst consensus is that 0 of the tactical nuclear stockpile works. We cannot live in fear of Russian aggression and nuclear blackmail. Remember at the start of this war, what did Russia threaten the West with if we came to the aid of the Ukrainians? Threatened us with the 3 Fs. Famine. They would stop the food flowing out of Odessa. Fuel. They would cut off the fuel to Europe and Europe would freeze. And then finally, fire. Nuclear fission. Now, the first 2 they've tried and they failed. The third one they can't try. And if they do, it's the end of Russia. So I'm not worried about nukes. And to tell you how not worried I am, I'm staying in Kyiv. Where are they? If they're going to send a nuke, what are they going to nuke? They're going to nuke Kyiv. And so just being here every day, speaking to you about it calmly and professionally, which is very difficult for me to do, I don't believe a word of it, and I'm literally willing to put my life on the line to demonstrate that the Russians are full of shit. I want to thank Chris Carter, who is the sponsor of this live and a member of the Patreon, whose ongoing support over the last 2 years has been deeply meaningful to me. Thank you, Chris, for everything. I really appreciate it. And then thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server. Thanks to Nightshade, who has the Peters Peeps group. And thanks to Jay and Travis, the best moderators on the Tickety Talk. I'm Peter Alexievich, and we got about 8 minutes left, so we'll go to Q&A. What are you guys thinking about? What questions do you have, etc.? Yeah, Robert, you know, Biden was better for Ukraine than I thought he'd be, but he wasn't good enough. He wasn't. You only have two things to worry about in this world, right? Are you healthy or are you sick? If you're sick, you only have two things to worry about. Will you get better or will you not? If you'll get better, you don't have anything to worry about. If you're going to get worse, you only have two things to worry about. Are you going to die or are you going to live? If you're going to live, you got nothing to worry about. If you're going to die, you only have two things to worry about. Are you going to heaven or are you going to hell? If you're going to heaven, you got nothing to worry about. And if you're going to hell, well, you're done. No, Zelensky is not in the USA. He was up in the Baltics at something I think they call the B9 conference. I don't have the details. I'm sorry. The trip abroad to the Allies was not on the priority list today. I'll try to find out for tomorrow where he's been and what he's up to. Crimean Bridge is damaged. The car portion of the bridge is not. And so it is open again after being closed overnight. Anthony Stump, with all due respect, Russia won the Cold War. See, we thought the Cold War was over in 1989. It wasn't. Russia kept it up. And they have won the Cold War by seeing to it that their puppet, Trump, is in the White House. Russia won the Cold War in the election of a malign foreign agent who has subverted the federal system of the U.S. government. That was when the Cold War was won. Make no mistake. Kerch is still standing. The car portion of the bridge is reopened. It was only the rail portion that was damaged. Somebody's saying they heard Neptune missiles were on their way. I don't know anything about that. Mike, I had to stop the news we're waking up to. Like 10 people were watching it. The fact that you haven't asked about it for literally 2 weeks since I stopped doing it and announced I would stop doing it tells me that people aren't watching it. It was too much effort for too little reach. So I'm putting my energy into other stuff. I had promised the Patreon some of that stuff by last Friday, but it's taking longer, so bear with me. But there is some good stuff coming. Hi, Time. I hope you're being sarcastic there. Do you think Trump will call Putin out? No, Trump works for Putin. Come on. He will never call him out. Never. Zelensky's right-hand man flew into Andrews Air Force Base at 3 a.m. local time today to meet Kellogg. Kellogg is increasingly useless. He recently said that Russia's concerns about NATO's eastward expansion were fair. Fuck off. Oh, McCartney would have Trump in jail. If we were during the time of the McCartney hearings, Trump would be in jail. The EU is filling the supply gap created by Trump, we hope. The poor guy that's meeting Kellogg today is probably there to be dressed down and insulted that they hit the strategic bomber fleet, which is so offensive to me in so many ways. He's not there to be congratulated on doing the world a favor and degrading Russia's nuclear capabilities. He's there to be dressed down by a bunch of incompetents that are traitors to their own nation and lapdogs of the Kremlin. It's disgusting. What will the retaliation look like? That is a meaningless question. Every single day for 3 years and 100 days, the Russians have thrown everything they can at Ukraine. What the fuck are you talking about? Retaliation. Does Russia collapse before 2026? I think so. I'll be extraordinarily surprised if the Russian Federation as we know it today, headed by Putin, is still with us in 6 months. Amalek, that's, you know what, I'm not even going to talk to you. I mean, if you're going to come in here and say something that's such a blatant lie, you just get muted. Trump is definitely a Russian operative. Yes. Trump is definitely in the pocket of the Kremlin. Everything he does is just a bouquet of flowers to the Kremlin. Give me a break. Yeah, Robert, it's ridiculous. See, this is what I mean. The Democrats are either colluding with the Republicans or they're just incompetent. They had 4 years to prove the case against Donald Trump and lock his ass up, and they failed. I know, Richard, and I appreciate it, man. I do. Don't worry, you're going to be very happy with what I'm doing instead. Just give me time because this shit takes longer. Right, it's not retaliation. It's just the daily Russian war crimes. Oh, there he is. Let's get rid of you with your bullshit. Yeah, Roy, I saw that. So Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, said today that he supports sanctions on Russia. We know that the Senate has a bill ready to go that's got 81 sponsors. That's enough to override a veto. If Johnson can get enough in the House to override a veto, which I think he can, then Trump will have no choice but to sign it if they just do their jobs and pass the legislation. What did the Buddhist monk say to the hot dog vendor? Does anybody know? Does anybody know what the Buddhist monk said to the hot dog vendor? I know, Steve, and we're going to have to wait a little while longer. Come on, what did there you go, Kathy. Kathy's on the ball. Make me one with everything. Do you know what happened next? Do you know what happened next, Kath? Yeah, Roy, we talked about it earlier. There's satellite images of one A-50 destroyed. It may have been the last working A-50. So what happened next was, the hot dog vendor the monk reaches into his saffron robes, pulls out a $20 bill, hands it to the hot dog vendor, And he's there eating his hot dog, one with everything. And the guy doesn't give him any money. So he turns to the hot dog vendor and he says, "Where's my change?" And the hot dog vendor says, "Change comes only from within." And that's the reality of this war. Change has to come from within Russia. Russia has to stop living their lives based on lies. And so do the maggots in the United States. We got to grow up out of this nonsense. These racist, insane visions of imperial society. And we have to learn how to do the hard work of civilization, of pursuing medicine, science, what it means to build the just city, what it means to live together as people. And that's hard work. And you have to put up with people you don't like. And the Russians and the maggots, they're just not mature enough to do it. All they can do is name, call, and tear down. And that will be the end of civilization in a world where we have planet-killing weapons. And we're at a crucial inflection point here, which way this species is going to go. Are we going to keep kowtowing to the might makes right crowd? Or are we going to stand up? Something interesting happened today. I got banned from X. I want to thank a guy named DEEJAY9748, I think. I think it's 9748, here on TikTok. He published video of some folks, I think in San Diego. I think this was in San Diego. ICE came into their neighborhood to try to rip some children away from their families. And the entire community came out and drove ICE back, shouting shame at them, cowards at them, demanding to see warrants, which of course they did not have, and drove them out of the community. I reposted that video on X and was immediately banned from X. So I am off of X, and I'm glad about it. I never liked being on X at all, but it is a place to get information. And these days, though, it is just a sewer of the worst kind of fascist bullshit. I mean, so much for Musk as a free speech absolutist, right? You show what's happening in the U.S. and you're banned. So I was never really on Twitter. I had like 40 followers on Twitter, something like that. And now I'm off it, and I feel good about it. I'm going cold turkey. I am on Threads and Blue Sky for people that use those apps if you want to follow me there. Okay. So guys, again, thanks so much to Chris Carter, who is the sponsor of this live. Thanks so much to Lars, who has the Discord server, Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group on the Book of Faces, and, of course, to the best moderators on the Tickety Talk, Jay and Travis. Good night, everybody. Make it a great day. I'll talk to y'all soon. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody. And guys, we do have a sponsor for tomorrow night's live, but we don't have one for Thursday or Friday. So if anybody wants to sponsor a live, the PayPal is in the description. Sure could use the help. Or join the Patreon and help me stay here in Ukraine. Hi, Time, you're a funny guy. You're a funny guy. You can hang around a little bit. We'll see where that goes. All right. Make it a great day, everybody.